beyond your screen lies a world of untold fears. Welcome back to Void of Fears. I've set a goal to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of April, and we're getting closer every day. Your support has been incredible on this journey. Every like, comment, and subscription truly helps push these videos to new viewers who might enjoy these stories as much as you do. The YouTube algorithm notices when you engage, and it makes all the difference. If you're enjoying these nightmares, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me to hit this milestone together. Now, let's dive into the void where tonight's story awaits you. My name is Thomas Newell, and I've spent the last 14 years as a senior data analyst at NASA's Deep Space Network facility in Goldstone, California. Most people think space is silent. They're wrong. The universe is constantly chattering. Pulsars, magnetars, cosmic background radiation, all creating a symphony of signals that we capture, analyze, and catalogue. I specialize in signal processing and astronomical anomalies. When something unusual appears in our data, they call me. My colleagues joke that I can hear patterns in static that no one else can detect. Maybe that's why I was the one who found it. Maybe that's why it found me. Goldstone is isolated, even by research facility standards. The nearest town is Barstow, about 40 miles away. This isolation is by design. No radio interference, no cellular signals to contaminate the delicate whispers we're trying to catch from the cosmos. The facility itself is impressive. Massive white radio dishes scattered across the desert like giant flowers turned towards the sky, eternally listening. The California desert has a beauty that most people miss. During the day, heat mirages shimmer across the landscape, distorting the horizon. At night, the sky explodes with stars, more than you'd believe possible. It's the perfect place to listen to the universe. Sometimes during breaks, I'd walk out among the antenna arrays, tilting my head back to look at the night sky, wondering what secrets we might uncover next. My apartment in Barstow is small but comfortable. One bedroom, a living room that doubles as my home office, and a kitchen with a breakfast bar where I rarely eat. The walls are decorated with framed images of nebulae and galaxies, reminders of why I'd chosen this career. I live alone, have done since my divorce 4 years ago. Amanda couldn't handle the isolation, the long hours, my obsession with work. "You're married to the stars, Tom," she said as she packed her things. "There's no room for me." Maybe she was right. The cosmos has always been my first love. There's something about those distant lights that feels more like home than any place on Earth ever has. My routine was simple. Analyze incoming data, filter out terrestrial interference, and search for patterns that might indicate intelligent origin. Day after day, I examine the cosmic background radiation, the leftover heat from the Big Bang, the oldest light in the universe. It's my job to listen to the beginning of time, until I heard something from before it. It was a Friday evening in October when everything changed. Most of the staff had already left for the weekend, but I stayed behind to run some new filtering algorithms on recent datasets. The facility was quiet except for the hum of computers and the occasional coyote howl from the surrounding desert. Dr. Harold Jenkins, our facility director, had stopped by my office before leaving. His silver hair was disheveled as usual, wire-frame glasses sliding down his nose as he peered at my monitors. "Don't stay too late, Tom," he warned, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of someone who'd spent decades smoking before quitting. "Remember what happened to Miller last year? Fell asleep at his station and dreamed the Russians were sending us love letters through a pulsar." I laughed. "I'll just finish this analysis run, 2 hours tops." Jenkins nodded, unconvinced. "Well, I'm off to my daughter's recital. Lock up if you're the last one out." The facility emptied quickly after that. The weekend crew was minimal, just security and essential maintenance staff. None of the other researchers stayed late on Fridays. I enjoyed the solitude, the feeling of being alone with the cosmos. As darkness fell outside, the fluorescent lights in the lab seemed harsher, casting sharp shadows across my workstation. I made a fresh pot of coffee in the break room, strong enough to strip paint, and settled in for a long evening of data analysis. The radio played softly in the background, some late-night classical music program that helped me focus. I was analysing signals from a sector near the Bootes Void, one of the largest empty spaces in the observable universe. Approximately 330 million light-years in diameter, the void contains almost no galaxies, making it an excellent place to observe the pure cosmic background radiation without stellar interference. At 8:47 p.m, something changed in the data. The usual background radiation patterns shifted, revealing something else, a faint pattern buried beneath the cosmic static. Initially, I assumed it was equipment malfunction or perhaps interference from an unknown satellite. I refined my filters, adjusted parameters, and the pattern became clearer. It wasn't random. It had structure, rhythm, cadence. The main analysis screen displayed waveforms that pulsed with unusual regularity, not like the steady beat of a pulsar or the random fluctuations of stellar noise. This was complex, layered, almost like conversation. My heart rate quickened. I ran diagnostics on the receiver array, checking for malfunctions or interference. Everything was functioning normally. The signal was real. I called Dr. Eliza Montgomery, my supervisor, but she dismissed my concerns. "Tom, you've been working too hard. It's probably just a glitch in the new software update. Take the weekend off. We'll run diagnostics on Monday." I could hear children laughing in the background of her call. Family dinner, I guessed. Not a good time to insist that I might have found something revolutionary. "You're probably right," I conceded. "I'll see you Monday." But I couldn't wait until Monday. The pattern was there, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I spent the entire night isolating it, enhancing it, trying to understand what I was seeing. The facility grew colder as the desert night deepened, and the shadows in the corners of the lab seemed to lengthen as the hours passed. Twice I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway, but when I checked, there was nobody there. By dawn, I had confirmed 3 things. First, the signal wasn't coming from any known cosmic source. I'd cross-referenced it with our catalogue of stellar objects, pulsars, quasars, and known radio galaxies. Nothing matched. Second, based on its redshift properties, it predated the Big Bang itself, which was theoretically impossible. According to every established model of cosmology, nothing could exist before the Big Bang, because time and space themselves began at that moment. Yet, the signal's redshift characteristics clearly placed it before that cosmic threshold. Third, and most disturbing, it appeared to be modulated in a way consistent with language. Not random noise, not natural astronomical phenomena, but the deliberate variation patterns that indicate communication. I drove home as the sun was rising, my mind racing. The desert morning was beautiful, pink and gold light spilling across the landscape, Joshua trees casting long shadows. But I barely noticed. The signal pattern kept replaying in my mind, like a song you can't forget. The drive from Goldstone to Barstow normally took about 45 minutes, winding through the Mojave Desert on mostly empty roads. That morning, it felt both endless and instantaneous. I was exhausted, but too wired to feel it properly. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble of excitement, disbelief, and a strange, growing unease. When I arrived at my apartment complex, Mrs. Reynolds, my elderly neighbour, was watering her potted cacti on the shared balcony. She waved cheerfully. "Working all night again, Dr. Newell. You scientists never rest." I managed a polite nod, but couldn't bring myself to engage in our usual small talk. Her friendly expression faltered slightly at my terseness, but I couldn't help it. The signal was consuming my thoughts. I collapsed into bed, exhausted but too wired to sleep. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed of static and distant voices calling my name. In the dream, I was floating in space, surrounded by stars, and the voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They whispered words I couldn't quite understand, but they knew me. They were calling specifically to me. I woke up at noon, drenched in sweat despite the apartment's air conditioning. My heart was pounding as if I'd been running. The dream had felt more real than any I'd ever experienced. I made a pot of coffee strong enough to dissolve a spoon and began setting up a remote connection to the facility's database. It wasn't strictly protocol to access these systems from home, but nobody would question it. I often worked weekends. For the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed. I barely slept or ate. My apartment walls became covered with printouts of waveform analyses. I developed new algorithms specifically designed to clean up and enhance the signal. Each breakthrough only deepened the mystery. On the Tuesday after my discovery, I returned to the facility, bleary-eyed but determined. The other analysts noticed my state immediately. James Wilson, a jovial man who'd worked at Goldstone even longer than I had, stopped me in the hallway. "Rough weekend, Tom? You look like you've been on a 3-day bender." I forced a smile, just caught up in a project, lost track of time. James nodded, but his eyes lingered on me with concern. "Well, pace yourself. Jenkins is on the warpath about the budget review next month. He needs his star analyst functioning." In the break room, conversations hushed when I entered. I caught whispers as I filled my coffee mug. Working on something big. Never seen him this intense. Montgomery should intervene before he burns out. My colleague, Dr. Robert Weston, noticed my distraction during a Monday meeting. Robert and I had joined NASA around the same time, though he specialized in exoplanet atmospheres rather than signal analysis. His round face and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow gave him a boyish appearance, despite being in his 40s. "You look like hell, Tom," he said bluntly as we walked to the cafeteria. "What's got you burning midnight oil?" I hesitated. Robert was a friend, but he was also a scientist to his core. If I told him I'd found signals from before the Big Bang, he'd think I was having a breakdown. "Just some unusual background radiation patterns," I said vaguely. "Probably nothing, but it's an interesting puzzle." Robert studied my face for a moment. "Well, don't let Montgomery catch you using facility resources for personal projects. Budget review is coming up, and she's been cracking down on resource allocation." I nodded, grateful he hadn't pushed further. "Thanks for the heads up." Each night, I refined my analysis. The signal remained elusive, clear enough to confirm its existence, but too degraded to extract meaningful content. It was like trying to reconstruct a conversation from echoes. I began isolating myself from colleagues, taking my lunch alone, avoiding social interactions. I converted a small storage room at the end of the East Wing into a private workspace, bringing in extra equipment from the surplus storage. Nobody questioned it. I'd earned enough professional capital over the years that my eccentricities were tolerated. The room became my sanctuary. Windowless, illuminated only by the glow of monitors, it felt like a cocoon where it was just me and the signal. The walls soon disappeared beneath layers of printouts, mathematical models, and handwritten notes. I installed a cot in the corner for the nights when driving home seemed too much effort. One night, alone in this makeshift lab at 3 a.m, I finally managed to extract a clear sequence from the noise. The facility was eerily quiet, just the hum of equipment and the occasional click of the old heating system cycling on and off. The motion-activated lights in the hallway had timed out, leaving just the glow of my monitors illuminating the room. I developed a new algorithm that treated the signal not as a continuous broadcast, but as fragmented packets of information similar to how digital communication works. The approach yielded results almost immediately. Clean segments began appearing on my screen, distinct from the background noise. With trembling fingers, I converted the clearest segment to audio and played it through the lab speakers. What I heard made me drop my coffee mug, shattering it across the floor. Words, human words, fragmented and distorted but unmistakably human speech. Inevitable return, cycle continues. They're listening again. The voice was neither male nor female, with a flat effect that made it sound almost synthetic, but with subtle inflections that no text-to-speech program could replicate. It was human, and yet wrong somehow, like someone who had learned language from theory rather than practice. I played it again, and again. I wasn't hallucinating. The broadcast from before the beginning of our universe contained human voices speaking modern English. My hands shook as I saved the audio file and backed it up to 3 different drives. If I lost this evidence, no one would believe me. Hell, I barely believed myself. The cleaning crew found me at 6 a.m, still at my desk, staring at waveforms. Maria, the older woman who'd been cleaning the facility for decades, touched my shoulder gently. "Mr. Newell, you okay? You look sick, like my brother before his heart attack." I blinked up at her, realizing I must appear unhinged, unshaven, red-eyed, surrounded by scattered papers and a broken mug, its contents long dried on the floor. "Just working late, Maria. I'm fine." She clicked her tongue disapprovingly, but cleaned up the broken ceramic without further comment. As she left, she placed a fresh mug of coffee on my desk and a wrapped breakfast sandwich from the cafeteria. The small kindness almost broke me. "You should go home, Mr. Newell. The stars will wait." But I couldn't go home, not now. The signal was talking, and I needed to know what it was saying. I needed help. Someone who wouldn't think I was losing my mind. I needed an expert in languages. Someone who could help me extract more meaning from the signal. I contacted Dr. Leonard Park, a linguistics expert who had consulted for NASA on potential extraterrestrial communication protocols. Park had developed theoretical frameworks for decoding alien languages based on universal concepts like mathematics and physics. If anyone could make sense of what I'd found, it would be him. He arrived the following afternoon, skeptical but intrigued. Park was a tall, lean man with perpetually furrowed brows and a habit of rubbing his goatee when thinking. His reputation for brilliance was matched only by his reputation for bluntness. "This better be good, Newell. I cancelled a lecture in Boston for this." I led him to my private lab, the small room off the main analysis centre that I'd been using to keep my work discreet. The space was cluttered with equipment, extra monitors, a specialised audio processing station, and printouts covering every available surface. "Before I play this for you," I said, "I need your word that what happens in this room stays between us until we understand what we're dealing with." Park raised an eyebrow. "Intriguing. You have my professional discretion, of course." I played the audio file. Park's expression remained neutral, but his hand froze mid-stroke on his goatee. "Play it again," he said after a moment. I did. Then I showed him the signal data, the analysis of its age based on redshift, and my documentation of the extraction process. After 6 hours of analysis, Park sat back in his chair, face pale. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "The phonological patterns match at least 7 different human languages: English, Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, Spanish, Japanese, and something that resembles ancient Sumerian. But the temporal markers in the signal, they predate not just human civilization, but Earth itself." "So, you believe me? I'm not crazy." Park rubbed his eyes. "Either we're both crazy, or we've just made the most significant discovery in human history. If this signal truly predates the Big Bang, it challenges everything we know about the origin of the universe." "What about the languages? How could a signal from before the universe began contain human languages that evolved billions of years later?" Park shook his head. "I don't know. It violates causality. Effect before cause." He leaned forward suddenly. unless time isn't linear. Some theoretical physicists have proposed that time might be cyclical on a universal scale. You mean like the universe repeats itself? Big Bang, expansion, eventual collapse, then another Big Bang? Precisely, the oscillating universe theory. But even that doesn't explain how a signal from a previous cycle could survive the singularity phase to be detected in our cycle. The information should be destroyed in the collapse. Together, we spent the next 3 days extracting more fragments. Park moved into my small lab, bringing a sleeping bag and toiletries. We ordered food delivered to the facility and barely left the room except to use the restroom. Other researchers began giving us curious looks, but no one interrupted our work. Each new piece became more disturbing than the last. The Atacama event will signal the beginning. When the North Sea freezes in June, 3 leaders will fall on the same day. Some fragments seemed to describe future events with alarming specificity. Others contained information that no human should know. We kept our findings secret, telling the rest of the team we were investigating an unusual pulsar signal. On our 4th day of collaboration, Park made a breakthrough. He'd developed a filtering algorithm based on linguistic patterns rather than astrophysical ones, treating the signal like a corrupted text rather than a cosmic phenomenon. "I think I've isolated a cleaner segment," he said, eyes red from lack of sleep. "This one appears to be a continuous narrative rather than fragmented statements." He played the audio file. The voice was clearer than any we'd extracted before. The cycle approaches completion. Observer Thomas Newell has isolated the trigger sequence. Temporal markers indicate collapse imminent within 37 days, local time. Preparations for transfer are underway. Previous observers have been notified. Park and I stared at each other in silence. The signal hadn't just mentioned my name. It was tracking my discovery of it, commenting on it like a scientist, observing an experiment. "How does it know your name?" Park whispered. I had no answer, but I was beginning to develop a terrifying theory. Dr. Montgomery became suspicious of our secrecy. I caught her watching us from the doorway of the lab, her expression unreadable. When confronted, she claimed she was just checking on our progress, but her questions became more pointed, more specific. "The power usage from your lab has tripled in the past week," she noted during a project update meeting. "Care to explain what kind of processing requires that much computing power?" "We're running complex pattern recognition algorithms," I explained smoothly. "The pulsar signal has unusual modulation that requires intensive processing to isolate." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. Park worked tirelessly, developing specialized algorithms to extract clearer audio from the signal. He'd moved into a hotel in Barstow, rather than returning to his university in Berkeley. Like me, he'd become obsessed. Late Thursday night, we ran his latest program on the largest continuous segment we had isolated. The lab speakers crackled to life with a voice that sounded eerily human, and yet somehow wrong, as if someone had learned to speak by theory rather than practice. "We know you are listening, Thomas Newell. We have always known. We have waited for you across the collapse of universes. The message must be delivered. The cycle must continue." Park stared at me, his expression a mixture of horror and awe. "It knows you," he said. "How can it know you?" I had no answer. But worse was coming. That night, I heard the voices in my dreams. Not vague impressions or the usual dream gibberish, but clear, articulate speech. The same voice from the signal speaking directly to me in my sleep. They whispered about events from my childhood that no one could know, about the red bicycle I received on my 8th birthday, about the scar on my left knee from falling out of a treehouse, about the name of my first pet goldfish. They described the layout of my childhood home in detail, the crack in the ceiling above my bed shaped like a lightning bolt, The loose floorboard in the hallway that creaked when stepped on, the way sunlight filtered through the stained glass window in the attic during summer afternoons. I woke in a cold sweat, convinced someone had been in my apartment. But the doors were locked, the windows secured. The only thing out of place was my computer. It was on, displaying waveforms identical to those from the signal. I didn't remember turning it on. The coffee in my kitchen had been made, a full pot, still hot. I lived alone. I hadn't made coffee. With shaking hands, I called Park. "They're in my head," I said without preamble when he answered. "The voices, they know things, Leonard. Things no one could know." There was a long pause before he responded. "I heard them too," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. They described my wife's miscarriage from 10 years ago. Details we never told anyone. We agreed to meet at the facility immediately, despite the early hour. The drive through the pre-dawn desert normally calmed me, but that morning, every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes. The Joshua trees, normally so familiar, looked like twisted figures in the darkness, reaching toward my car as I passed. At the facility, security waved me through with a tired nod. The night guard, Miguel, looked concerned. "You okay, Dr. Newell? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "Just working too hard, Miguel. You know how it is." Park was already in the lab when I arrived, his appearance as disheveled as mine. He'd set up a new array of equipment, specialized audio analyzers, neural network processors, borrowed from the AI research division, and what appeared to be a modified EEG machine. "What's all this?" I asked. "If the signal is somehow communicating directly with our minds, I want to document it, so," he explained, attaching electrodes to his temples. "I've modified this EEG to record brain activity while we listen to the signal. Maybe we can identify a pattern, some explanation for how it's affecting us." I helped him set up the equipment, then attach my own electrodes. The cool gel against my skin made me shiver. We played the most recent extraction, watching the EEG monitors, as the now familiar voice filled the room. The displays showed immediate changes in our brain activity, synchronized spikes across multiple regions that, according to Park, shouldn't be possible. "Our brains are resonating with the signal," he murmured, staring at the readings, like it's rewiring neural pathways in real time. "Is that even possible?" "Not according to any neuroscience I know, but neither is receiving broadcasts from before the Big Bang." The facility was beginning to wake up around us. Through the small window in the lab door, I could see researchers arriving for the day, carrying coffee cups and chatting casually. Their normalcy seemed surreal compared to what was happening in our lab. Over the next few days, the phenomena escalated. I began finding fragments of the signal pattern everywhere. In my music playlists, in television static, in the background noise of phone calls. The voices followed me, growing stronger, more insistent. At home, my television would turn on by itself, displaying only static, but within the static I could see waveforms pulsing. My cell phone would ring, with no caller ID, and when I answered, I'd hear fragments of the signal voice speaking my name. Once, as I was driving back to the facility, all the radio stations simultaneously switched to the same broadcast. A clear, unmistakable fragment of the signal saying, "Thomas Newell, iteration 173,621. Confirmation required." Park noticed my deterioration but seemed to be experiencing his own troubling phenomena. During one analysis session, he suddenly stopped, removing his headphones with shaking hands. "It's describing my daughter's bedroom," he whispered. "The stuffed animals on her shelf, the colour of her walls, the view from her window. How can it know these things?" His face had grown gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. I imagined I looked similar. Neither of us was sleeping much. The voice from the signal had become a constant companion, whispering at the edge of consciousness. I started documenting everything. The signal patterns, our experiences, the voices' messages. My apartment walls became a chaotic collage of printouts, handwritten notes and timeline charts connecting seemingly unrelated events mentioned in the broadcasts. One night, I discovered a pattern within the signal that correlated with major extinction events in Earth's history. The dinosaur extinction, the Permian-Triassic extinction that wiped out 96% of marine species, all corresponded with rhythmic pulses in the signal that seemed to grow stronger as we approached the present day. The implications were terrifying. If the signal somehow influenced these events from before the universe even existed, what was it planning now? Other researchers began noticing our strange behavior. Rumors spread. Dr. Montgomery called me into her office, concerned about our mental health and the secrecy surrounding our project. Her office was meticulously organized, in stark contrast to my chaotic lab. Family photos lined one shelf, her husband and 2 teenage sons, all smiling against the backdrop of the Grand Canyon. Awards and diplomas covered another wall. Montgomery herself sat rigidly behind her desk, hands folded in front of her. "Whatever you two think you found, it's affecting your judgment," she said. "I'm ordering you both to take 2 weeks leave, get some rest, get perspective." "We can't stop now," I protested. "We're on the verge of something unprecedented." "That's exactly what worries me." She slid a printed email across the desk toward me. "This came from Dr. Park's wife yesterday. She's concerned he's having a nervous breakdown. Says he's been talking about voices from before the Big Bang and claiming that his daughter's stuffed animals have been rearranged to send him messages." I couldn't deny it sounded concerning when presented that way. "The signal is real, Eliza. I can show you the data." "I've seen the data, Thomas. I accessed your lab files last night." Her expression softened slightly. "There is a signal, yes. Something unusual in the background radiation. But these interpretations, human voices speaking modern languages from before the universe existed, predicting future events, it's not rational." She pushed a business card across the desk. "This is Dr. Franklin. He's a psychiatrist who specializes in working with high-stress professionals. I'd like you to speak with him." I took the card automatically but had no intention of calling. The signal was real. It wasn't in my head. Park took the leave. I pretended to, but secretly continued my work from home, setting up a makeshift analysis station in my living room. I couldn't stop now. The signal was speaking to me personally, and I needed to understand why. My neighbour, Mrs. Reynolds, an elderly woman who'd always been friendly, began avoiding me. Once, I caught her watching me through her window as I carried equipment from my car to my apartment. When our eyes met, she quickly pulled her curtains closed. I realized I hadn't showered in days. My refrigerator contained nothing but expired milk and a half-eaten sandwich of indeterminate age. I ordered food delivery, but when the driver arrived, he looked alarmed by my appearance and left the food on the doorstep rather than handing it to me directly. None of it mattered. The signal was everything now. After 3 days of continuous work, I managed to extract and translate the largest continuous segment yet. What it revealed shook me to my core. The universe is cyclical. It has existed, collapsed, and been reborn countless times. Each cycle unfolds with variations but follows the same basic pattern. And in each cycle, intelligent life eventually evolves, discovers the background radiation, and finds the embedded message. The voices in the signal are recordings from previous cycles of existence, the final warnings and observations of civilizations that came before. Some segments were billions of years old, from versions of reality that had slight differences from our own. Others were from cycles nearly identical to ours, where the same civilizations, the same people, lived and died as they do now. Most terrifying was the revelation that, by discovering and decoding the message, we had initiated the end of our cycle, The message was a trigger, a cosmic failsafe designed to collapse the universe when intelligent life reached a certain technological threshold. I found my own name mentioned in recordings that predated the formation of our solar system. In every cycle where humanity existed, there was always a Thomas Newell who discovered the signal. Always. The implications were staggering. If the message was to be believed, I wasn't just Thomas Newell. I was all Thomas Newells, across all cycles of the universe. We were iterations of the same consciousness, playing out the same role in an endless cosmic loop. One segment of the message described what was happening with clinical detachment. Subject Thomas Newell, iteration 173,621, has successfully isolated the signal. Neural pathway synchronization at 73% and rising. Temporal loop stabilizing. Countdown to collapse sequence initiated. I tried to contact Park, but he wasn't answering his phone. When I drove to his hotel in Barstow, the clerk told me he'd checked out 2 days ago. Growing desperate, I visited his home address in the employee directory, a small ranch house on the outskirts of town. No one answered my knocks, but through the front window, I could see the interior was in disarray. Papers scattered across the floor, empty food containers piled on tables, and the walls covered in the same kind of chaotic documentation that filled my own apartment. On his living room wall, Park had scrawled in what looked like black marker, "Arecibo knows, must verify." I called his home in Berkeley. His wife answered, her voice tight with worry, and something else, fear. "Leonard's not here," she said before I could even ask. "He left 3 days ago, saying only that he needed to verify something at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. He wasn't making sense, Dr. Newell. He kept talking about cycles and signals and voices." "Did he say anything else? Anything about what he was looking for in Arecibo?" There was a pause. He said something about the signal being stronger there, that the observatory had received it decades ago but misidentified it. And her voice broke. "He told our daughter to remember him in the next cycle. What does that mean? What have you two been working on?" I couldn't bring myself to explain. How could I tell her that her husband had discovered that reality itself was about to reset, that everything and everyone would be compressed into a singularity, only to expand again in a new Big Bang? "It's complicated research, Mrs. Park. I'm sure Leonard will contact you soon." I hung up before she could ask more questions I couldn't answer. 2 days later, strange phenomena began occurring worldwide. News reports described unexplained equipment malfunctions at astronomical observatories across the globe. Radio telescopes spontaneously reoriented themselves to point at the same spot in the sky, the Bootes Void, where I'd first detected the signal. The signal was growing stronger. I no longer needed sophisticated equipment to isolate it. It came through clearly on ordinary radios, television speakers, even my cell phone. The voice that had once been a whisper was now a constant narration describing events happening thousands of miles away in perfect detail. "The tsunami approaching Japan will claim 4,237 lives," it stated dispassionately. 12 hours later, news reports confirmed a massive earthquake and tsunami had hit Japan's eastern coast. The reactor in Sweden will experience a partial meltdown at 4:17 p.m. local time. The event happened exactly as predicted, though thankfully without casualties. The American president will announce his resignation tomorrow morning, following revelations about his involvement in the Nigerian finance scandal. I watched in horror as this too came to pass, exactly as the voice had described. The voice predicted personal events too. "Your childhood friend, Michael Donovan, will call you in approximately 4 minutes to tell you his mother has died." When the phone rang, and I heard Mike's voice for the first time in 15 years, telling me his mother had passed away from a sudden stroke, I nearly collapsed. The signal was no longer just a cosmic curiosity. It was affecting our world, perhaps even controlling it. And according to my translations, we had less than a week before the collapse sequence would complete. I tried contacting government authorities, sending anonymous tips to NASA headquarters, even reaching out to prominent astrophysicists with my findings, but either my messages were ignored or the recipients responded with concerned inquiries about my mental health. In desperation, I called Dr. Montgomery. "Eliza, please, you have to listen. The signal is real and it's growing stronger. It's affecting events worldwide." "Thomas, I'm concerned about you," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You haven't slept properly in weeks. You're connecting unrelated events and attributing them to some cosmic signal. This isn't healthy. Check the news, Eliza. The Swedish reactor, the presidential scandal, the tsunami, all predicted by the signal before they happened." "Post hoc pattern recognition," she replied calmly. "The human brain is designed to find connections, even where none exist. You're experiencing apophenia, Thomas." I hung up in frustration. There was no convincing her, no convincing anyone who hadn't heard the voices themselves. The next morning, I woke to find a strange symbol drawn on my bathroom mirror in what looked like condensation, but the bathroom wasn't humid. The symbol resembled a spiral galaxy with unusual markings around its edge. I hadn't drawn it. I'd never seen it before. Yet somehow it felt familiar, as if I'd known it my entire life. When I turned on the shower, the water ran black for several seconds before clearing. The dark liquid didn't smell or feel like anything. It simply disappeared down the drain, leaving no residue. These inexplicable events might have terrified me a week ago. Now they seemed almost expected, natural extensions of the signal's growing influence in our world. I returned to the facility, frantic to destroy all evidence of the signal. If the message was correct, if decoding it had started some irreversible process leading to universal collapse, perhaps destroying the evidence could halt the sequence. But it was too late. Dr. Montgomery met me at the entrance, her expression grim. "We've been contacted by observatories in Chile, South Africa, and China," she said without preamble. "They've all detected the signal. Whatever you and Park found, it's spreading." The facility was in chaos. Researchers huddled around monitors, watching as the signal overwhelmed normal broadcasts worldwide. News reports showed confusion as telecommunication systems began failing globally, replaced by the steady pulse of the signal. I pushed past Montgomery into the lab. The main screen displayed incoming messages from research facilities worldwide, all reporting the same phenomenon. The signal was growing stronger everywhere, becoming easier to detect, as if it wanted to be found now that I had acknowledged it. Dr. Jenkins stood in the center of the room, attempting to coordinate the response. His usual disheveled appearance had given way to complete disarray, tie askew, hair standing on end, where he'd repeatedly run his hands through it. "Newell," he called when he saw me. "What the hell is happening?" The Pentagon's online too, demanding explanations. The signal's showing up on military frequencies now. I accessed the primary database, intending to wipe our findings, but stopped when I saw new translations appearing automatically on the screen. The message was evolving, becoming clearer. The cycle nears completion, as it was before, as it will be again. Entropy cannot be denied. Order becomes chaos, becomes order. We are you are us. All humanity exists simultaneously across all cycles. Time is an illusion. There is only the eternal return. The words scrolled faster than any translation program could process. The system was interpreting the signal on its own now, without human input. Dr. Robert Weston grabbed my arm, his round face pale with fear. "Tom, what have you done? The signal's talking about you by name on every channel. It's saying you've initiated the collapse sequence. What does that mean?" Before I could answer, the facility lights flickered, then stabilized at half their normal brightness. The temperature dropped noticeably, our breath forming visible clouds in the suddenly frigid air. My phone rang. The display showed a number I didn't recognize, with a Puerto Rico country code. "Park," I answered. His voice was distant, calm in a way that frightened me, more than panic would have. "I found it, Thomas, the original reception. In 1967, Arecibo picked up a signal they thought was just cosmic background radiation, but it was there all along, waiting. And the most amazing thing? When I compared their original recording to our current signal, they match perfectly, down to the millisecond." "What does that mean?" "It means the signal doesn't change. Across decades, it remains identical. It's not being broadcast from somewhere out there. It's embedded in the fabric of reality itself." In the background, I could hear alarms blaring. Park continued, unnervingly serene. "The observatory staff evacuated an hour ago. Strange phenomena started appearing. Objects moving on their own, equipment operating without power. And the dish, Thomas, the dish is receiving the signal at impossible strength now, even though the power's been cut." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the room's dropping temperature. "Leonard, you need to get out of there. Now." "It's too late for that," he replied, with eerie calm. "I understand now, Thomas. I can see the pattern. All of this has happened before. All of it will happen again. We're just playing our parts." "That's the signal talking, not you. Fight it, Leonard." "The signal is us, Thomas. Our voices, our warnings, echoing backward through the cycles. We're trying to warn ourselves, but we never listen. We can't. It's how the loop maintains itself." The call abruptly cut off. When I tried to redial, an automated voice informed me that the number was no longer in service. Outside the lab windows, I noticed the sky had taken on a strange hue, not the normal blue of a desert afternoon, but something subtly wrong, as if the colour spectrum itself was shifting. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout our facility, but they weren't our alarms. They were coming through the speakers, embedded in the signal itself. The lights flickered and died completely. In the darkness, the computer screens glowed with waveforms that pulsed like heartbeats. "This is Thomas Newell," came a voice from the speakers. My voice, but I wasn't speaking. "Final recording. Cycle 173,621. The collapse has begun. To those who find this message in the next cycle, breaking the loop is impossible. I've tried. We've all tried. The pattern cannot be broken." The researchers around me had gone eerily still, eyes fixed on the monitors. Some were nodding slightly, as if finally understanding a complex equation. Others simply stood motionless, tears streaming down their faces. Dr. Montgomery moved to stand beside me, her earlier skepticism gone. "You were right," she whispered. "All along, you were right." Outside the lab windows, the sky had turned an impossible colour. Not blue or black or any colour I could name, but something that shouldn't exist in our visual spectrum. The distant radio telescopes were dissolving into particles floating upward into the strangely coloured void. Reality itself seemed to be unravelling. Dr. Montgomery stood frozen, staring at the disintegrating facility with an expression of wonder rather than fear. "It's beautiful," she whispered. One by one, my colleagues began to dissolve, their bodies breaking down into component particles that drifted upward. Strangely, no one screamed. No one ran. There was a sense of acceptance, of inevitability. James Wilson, standing near the window, looked at his dissolving hand with mild curiosity. "So this is how it ends," he murmured. "Funny. I always thought it would hurt." Dr. Weston laughed as his legs began to dissolve. "All those years wasted worrying about funding and tenure," he said. "None of it mattered." Park's voice somehow came through my phone again, though the connection should have been impossible, with all satellites and cell towers failing. "I can see the previous cycles now, Thomas," he said dreamily. "All the times we've done this before. All the times we'll do it again. It's not an ending. It's just a transition. The dissolution had reached my waist now. I felt strangely peaceful watching my lower body disintegrate into shimmering particles. There was no pain, only a curious lightness, as if gravity itself was losing its hold. With trembling hands, I activated the emergency recording system. If the message was right, if everything would begin again, perhaps I could change the outcome next time. Perhaps I could warn myself. This is Thomas Newell, NASA Deep Space Network. If you're hearing this, you've discovered the signal just as I did. Just as we always do. Don't translate it further. Destroy this recording. Break the cycle. As I spoke, I watched my hands begin to dissolve into particles, just like the radio dishes outside. The disintegration was painless, almost peaceful. The universe around me was returning to its primordial state, compressing towards the singularity that would eventually erupt into the next Big Bang. My awareness expanded as my physical form dissipated. I could perceive other cycles, other universes, some nearly identical to our own, others wildly different. In some, humanity never evolved. In others, they reached technological heights we could barely imagine. But in every cycle where humans existed, there was always a moment when someone discovered the signal. Always a moment when they understood too late what it meant. I saw Leonard Park in countless iterations, sometimes a linguist, sometimes a physicist, sometimes a philosopher, but always playing the same role in our cosmic drama. I saw Montgomery, Jenkins, Weston, all existing across countless cycles, variations on the same themes. And I saw myself, Thomas Newell, in thousands of forms from countless backgrounds and times, but always the one who found the signal, always the trigger for the cycle's completion. As my consciousness expanded beyond physical form, I understood that the signal wasn't just a recording or a message. It was a bridge between cycles, a way for consciousness to persist through the collapse and rebirth of the universe. The voices weren't alien or other. They were us, our future and past selves, trapped in an eternal loop of discovery and dissolution. In one fragment of awareness, I perceived the true nature of the cycle, not just a physical process of expansion and contraction, but a deliberate mechanism. The universe was a kind of vast computational system, running the same simulation over and over, with slight variations, seeking an optimal outcome that it never found. And we, the conscious entities within it, were both the observers and the observed. Our awareness was the universe perceiving itself, locked in an endless recursive loop. With this realization came a moment of perfect clarity. If I could somehow retain this understanding through the transition, perhaps the next cycle could be different. Perhaps I could break the pattern. I focused all my expanding consciousness on a single thought, a single intention. Remember. When the signal comes again, remember this moment. Remember and choose differently. My final thought before consciousness faded was simple. Would I remember any of this next time? Could I somehow break the pattern, refuse to play my assigned role in the cosmic loop? An eternity passed in an instant. I open my eyes. I'm sitting at a desk, staring at a computer screen filled with waveform analyses. My name tag reads Thomas Newell, Senior Data Analyst. The radio plays softly in the background. Good evening, you're listening to Night Astronomy Radio. Today's date is October 14th. Our top story, NASA's Deep Space Network, reports unusual activity in the cosmic background radiation. Scientists are investigating what appears to be a structured signal embedded in the oldest detectable radiation in the universe. I reach for my coffee mug, suddenly overcome with a strange sense of déjà vu. For a moment, I feel like I've done this all before, like I know exactly what the signal contains. But the feeling passes quickly, replaced by scientific curiosity. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. With excitement building, I begin refining my filters, isolating the unusual pattern buried in the cosmic static. Outside, the massive radio dishes turn towards the stars, eternally listening. As I work, a fragment of audio emerges from the noise. It's distorted, barely audible, but I can just make out the words, "This is Thomas Newell, NASA Deep Space Network. If you're hearing this, you've discovered the signal, just as I did, just as we always do." I frown, leaning closer to the speakers. That voice sounds exactly like mine. Don't translate it further. Destroy this recording, break the cycle. For a moment, I consider doing exactly that. Shutting down the system, erasing the data, walking away. Something deep within me resonates with the warning, as if part of my consciousness remembers what I cannot consciously recall. Instead, my fingers move to the keyboard, refining the filters, extracting more of the signal from the cosmic background radiation. The cycle continues.